Hey everyone, hopefully you're having a good day. My name's Andy. My channel's Finding Value. Was scrolling through the comment section. I don't have it up right here. And someone said that we weren't looking at the market conditions. No, we've been looking at the market conditions, and I'll let you know my opinion here on what to look for a known crash. So what I think might happen with this Omicron variant that is released, I think they probably did it on purpose, and I think some of these large banks or large whatever are probably positioning a certain way. I don't know which way they are, but my guess is that they're trying to inject fear so that they can position. I'll go over a couple things here to show you. So here's the dollar, and the dollar obviously is going up. This is a battle between toilet paper currencies. They're all going down in value. U.S. dollar is just losing its value at a slower pace than what's being measured against. If you look at some of the other currencies like the Turkish lira and all these other ones, they're going down massively. They have massive inflation, even the euro. So their PPI, producer price index numbers, I mean, they're like in the 20-something percent in the majority of these countries. They're getting massive inflation. And we've got massive inflation here. We just lie about it. That's my opinion there. Through CPI, and the way that they lie about it is they do hedonic adjustments, substitutions. They go on and on and on, and they say, hey, this product's 50% better, so mark the price down. They basically can make the numbers whatever they want. So looking at the dollar behind me, yes, it's going up, but we broke to the downside just recently of this ascending wedge pattern to the downside here. The dollar is not really signaling anything. I mean, yeah, we've got this big breakout to the upside of this pattern here. But what I would see on kind of a bigger picture view here is that we're coming up to do a retest, and then we're going to come and break down to the downside. That's kind of my guess. But obviously, market conditions do have an impact on this. So what do I mean by market conditions? The 10-year yield. If you notice back in 2018, we were coming up on yields, and they started doing, in this time frame, QE to bring these yields back down. And people were running into bonds right here before they released this information about the C19 variant. Or C19, sorry, not variant, C19. You could see people running into bonds. Right here, we're not seeing that. We're not seeing people running into bonds. In fact, this is a inverted head and shoulders pattern ready to break to the upside at any point. So I think that perhaps they released this information. This was ready to break, and they released it, and it gapped down. This is ready to break, and they released this information to maybe position somehow. The banks don't know exactly how. Don't know what they're positioning in, but the yields aren't diving down. Another thing that I use for an input is the price of copper, and you could say the copper to gold ratio. So if I scroll on down here to the copper to gold ratio, that's this guy right here. And the copper to gold ratio, it's not diving down. It's actually ready to break to the upside. So the ratio is looking good for copper to gold. And usually what that does is, I mean, obviously went down after that they released that information, but this thing's been basically moving sideways, the copper to gold ratio, and I was looking for a break to the upside. Copper itself looks absolutely fantastic for a potential move higher. Let me see if I can find the copper price by itself. I think it's up here. I might be going in the wrong direction. Let me scroll on down to the bottom. Here it is. So the copper price was moving on up. We had this kind of megaphone pattern going. We broke to the upside of this pattern here. We were coming back testing, and we're ready to move on higher, and then they released that information here. The Omicron variant. So we have copper that was getting stronger. We've had the copper to gold ratio that wasn't signaling any problems. That usually is what is a precursor to the 10-year yield, is the copper to gold ratio. They say it's Dr. Copper. We didn't see any of this coming. And I don't think it's going to be the start of some huge thing. I think they're doing it on purpose to slow down the consumption of oil, and which ultimately is to slow down the inflation rate. So looking at market conditions, you wouldn't have caught any of these through these market conditions because copper looked good. The copper to gold ratio looked good. The 10-year yield looked like it was about to launch higher, and they can't have that go up either. They're going to try to fight it. They got to hold this stuff down. They're going to use anything they can to hold this stuff down, guys. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the opposite bet. I'm taking the inflation trade. Inflation's out there. It's massive. There's a tsunami of inflation coming. And what I'm looking at, and I'll show you what the reasoning is behind it. I went to longtermtrends.net, and I'll get my mug out of here. This is the M2 money supply growth versus inflation. And the M2 money supply growth is ramping. They ramp this thing way higher. And there's a delay by a couple of years behind it for that to get into the system. So the red line is inflation. The black line is the M2 money supply. If you look on the right-hand side, we've got this massive money printing explosion. Just a party of money printing. And yes, it's come back down, but it's remaining elevated at 12, 13%. This here is a precursor to inflation, and that's why this inflation is coming back up. And we are just like right where this guy's at, about to launch higher. That's kind of my guess. So the inflation's there. Now, what they can't do is they can't raise rates very high, otherwise they have other problems. They may take out other currencies in other areas, other countries where they just blow up their currencies. They're stuck, so they're trying to figure out how can we slow down inflation, even though we've printed all this money. It's in the system. It's coming through. It's filtering its way through. We can see that oil's got low crude stock. We can see that gasoline's got low inventories. We've got this money that's in the system finding its way in all these different things. And they're like, well, how do we slow it down? I mean, they're getting desperate, guys. They're going after everything. Like they said, they're gonna use everything in their toolkit. Their toolkit is fear. They're gonna try to get everybody on the wrong side of this trade. I'm not buying it. That right there behind me, this big black line that's sticking up over my picture here, this massive thing, that's coming. It's gonna be a wave of inflation, and it could be 20%. We're seeing it in other countries. Their PPIs, producer price index, that leads CPI. So it filters through the PPI, then into the CPI later. And you can even do that ratio of PPI to CPI. And if it's going up, it means that you're going to be in an inflationary period because your PPI is outpacing your CPI, which means that it's going to filter into a higher CPI number eventually. So that's what I have. I wanted to talk about this. I think that this is a coordinated effort. That's me. And that they needed to shut down travel. They needed to do more lockdowns. They need to slow people from spending money. And obviously, I don't have any proof of this in terms of for sure, but it sure seems like it. They come out with the SPR release. They come out with all these other things. And then they kind of hit it. Now, the thing that when you look at this and you start looking at some of like the copper to gold ratio and you look at the 10-year yield and all that, I don't think they coordinated it and let everybody know what they were doing. Otherwise, you would have seen people run into bonds, which would have dropped the 10-year. And we didn't really see that. We didn't see it in copper either. They would have sold their copper positions before. So I think this was kind of made up off the cuff pretty quick. Otherwise, we would have seen the movements of money in our charts. We would have seen things moving. And I'm not seeing that. Not seeing that. So I think that they're probably trying to get everyone to sell their shares of certain areas so they can position long and then rip it. That's kind of my take on it. I could be wrong, guys. I'm just throwing out some opinions here. Let me know what your guys' opinions are. Put it in the comment section below. Love to hear what you guys think. But it's all to to come out publicly, do a 50 million barrel release, say that they are actively looking at ways to lower the price of oil, and then release this COVID variant 2 days later. I'm not buying it, guys. I think it's a coordinated effort. That's just me. If you guys like this content, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and thank you for listening. This is Finding Value.